Do we have a representative here from the police department to speak, or our chief? Chief, we'll recognize you and let you take it from here.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Board of Commissioners, and to our city staff and everyone that's here. We thank you for the time that you have allotted out to allow us to come and to make this presentation and have this talk about the proposed police headquarters. And just thank everyone for their time. As we have been going through this for several things, one would be looking at the future growth plan of our department. As you know, we put together a 5- and 10-year plan outside, going forward, and looking at the current status of our current building and the challenges with various weather-related things, tornadoes and things like that. We thought it was very needful that we start seriously looking at upgrading our building. One, we're just running out of room, and two, for the safety and enhancement of our police department employees and our citizens here in Mount Juliet. And so with that said, we thank you for the opportunity, City Manager, for you being here. Our internal, I call him our internal project manager for this is Captain Untitled Chapter. So we want to bring him forward.
All right. Appreciate each of you and all your support through this project. We started, I want to say, a year and maybe 8 months ago on this, on getting some forward movement and getting some growth for us. We contracted with the architect workshop to help us design out of our current facility, which you'll see tonight will be Plan A. And then we recently got an effort to do a Plan B out in front of police headquarters. And tonight, the workshop team is going to show you some of the challenges that we faced as a police department and our needs through the needs assessment and all the studies that they've done with us over the past, I guess, year and 6 months since we contracted with them. And just a lot of good information for you guys. So I'm going to introduce James Kennan with the Architect Workshop.
Good evening. I'll keep the trend going. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to get to meet y'all tonight. We've just got like 7 slides to kind of walk you through. I think you've already seen kind of the detailed plans we put together previously, and we've done the budgets, and we've gone through a contractor RFQ with the city. And so now this is just kind of a high-level overview for y'all's background to have a discussion. So I just want to kind of remind you kind of what we had found through the space needs assessment and looking at their future growth plans, that, they needed about 32,000 square feet of building. They're in about a 16,000 square foot building right now. And then they have a lot of very expensive, nice machines that need to be protected from the weather. And that was going to take about another 13,000 square feet of just more garage type storage space, which we call the annex. And then there's just about 2,000 square feet of space scattered around the site between dumpsters, the Canine exercise area, and then primarily a place for the emergency generators and transformers to support the 911 center. And out of the city's concern because of tornadoes, we were actually designing that similar to how we did Sumner County's Emergency Operations Center to protect those from blown damage, wind damage. As we did the dispatch, as we did the programming, we kind of defined the high level what needs to be in the building, the 911 center, dispatch center, emergency operations center for the city, the police administration, evidence processing and storage. They're outgrowing that. They have containers behind the building already. Then patrol staff function will come out of this building. Interview rooms, quartermaster, the storage, which we mentioned above, Canine, and then facilities for training and exercise for the officers. And then the public facing side of the department, the records and the lobby and the traffic court. And so that's kind of the parts and pieces of this kind of building for them. The CID or detectives would remain in the facility they're in right now. They're not seen as moving into this building. And then just kind of when you think about a police headquarters building, a building for law enforcement, it's a fascinating building type. It's got a lot of parts and pieces. It's got office space, but it's got a whole lot of other space. The building code says this kind of building is an essential service, meaning when the storm blows through town, we want the building to still be there. And so that requires our structural engineer to design for loads that are 1.5 times what would be typical, with the goal of trying to make sure it stands up during a heavy storm. That's not tornado resistant. Tornado resistant is even above that. And that was one of the requirements y'all had asked for originally. And then the 911 Emergency Operations Center has a lot of different unique requirements. Again, so they can do their job, they can send the people to respond in an emergency. The Tennessee Emergency Communications Board and FPA 1221 both have requirements. They require a lot of redundant power, uninterrupted power, because we don't want those computers and radios to go down. Redundant telephone and radio sources, so they have more than one way of that information getting into dispatch. And then redundant HVAC systems and emergency lighting, again, so it continues to function regardless of whether they lose power to the building itself. And then the ICC 500 is another code that is applied to this kind of building through the IBC. And it requires that buildings like these law enforcement buildings have a public storm shelter built in them. So again, that's a heavily rated room to protect the occupants and the visitors in case of a tornado. And then the city had requested, which is fairly common in these kind of facilities, at least as far as ballistic protection. The city also requested tornado resilience and the ballistic resistance. And then when you're storing evidence, which is crime scene evidence, you need to have it maintained. It needs to be handled in a way that's safe for the officers. And so that puts another burden on the HVAC systems and the lighting systems to make sure that evidence is handled well and safely. And then you got Canine. It's always fun to do a little kennel for the dogs. I just don't want the dogs mad at me. And then as part of officers' duties, they often bring people in to arrest them, right? So we have facilities to bring them in called a Sally Port. They can securely get a suspect out, take them to an interview room, interview them, and take them back to the sheriff for jail. But again, that's some special mechanical, electrical. You got cameras you have to integrate. So it's just a little more complex than your average building. So I thought that would be helpful to y'all when you're thinking about this. So this is the overview of the site that we had developed previously and run through budgeting, run through contractor pricing. Do I have a laser on this? Oh, I do. All right, so that's your existing building. And then we designed 2 expansions, east and west sides of it. Again, because part of our mandate was to figure out what police needed and then design in a way that could potentially be phased. So on this side was dispatch and administration. And on this side was training, Sally Port. And then the existing building itself was renovated. Then you had staff parking in the back, which is secured, and then the annex, and then public parking here, which was important to police to allow people to access Charlie Daniels Park. And so kind of blowing that up, just real high level. So as I said, this side has the administration and dispatch, the records, lobby, public entrance, court, sits down here. The rest of the building is renovated for patrol and evidence and the support functions. And then on this side was Sally Port Canine and training. And then this is secured outside room for the generation transformer. And then if we can do covered parking, it's always beneficial because there's a lot of equipment in those cars. So that's kind of where we were. And then we were told this opportunity to look at a piece of property down out front. And so over the last 2 weeks, we did a little sprint and looked at very high level, how could that same program fit on this parcel out front. So there's the existing building again. It would fit as a 2-story police headquarters building here, annex toward the rear, and then it will leave a lot more space for the Charlie Daniels Park here. And then obviously this building could be repurposed for some other public good. we would see the thing that we discovered that would be really nice is the parking is much cleaner. We can actually get them 2 entrances in and out. So if in an event something blocked this entrance, they had a second way out to respond to calls. It also allowed us to have a secondary service court where people could come and get evidence, take deliveries, the transformers, independent of the main public lobby. And so just blowing that up again, you would have on the main level records, patrol, evidence, and lobby. And then on the upper level, admin, training, and dispatch. And then we thought potentially court could be expressed out here as part of the public. Court could also serve as a community room function. And then 2 gated entrances behind a secured fence, public parking over here, and then a service court, which allow deliveries, refuse, evidence to come in and out, the generator and the transformer here. So this would be 1 story, this would be 2 story. That was a very quick, little sprint of how all this could fit. And that is the quick overview of the police. Hand these out.
So I guess this would be the time to ask questions, correct? To both of you two. While we have you up there, first of all, thank you for sprinting and pulling this all together. I know it was a little bit of a kind of like a last minute switch. So thank you. We actually had an opportunity to talk to Captain Chandler about the concern of 2 stories. Is that something that is a concern with the NFPA 1221 and then the ICC 500? Is there any concern there, or will we still meet the qualifications?
You could still meet the qualifications. Murfreesboro was a 2-story building. Dispatch was on the upper floor. Brentwood, 2-story building. Dispatch was on the upper floor.
Okay.
And Mr. Trevette, to enhance what I spoke with you earlier, is originally when we were going into this, we did not, and we still do not have a backup communication center. We have an opportunity to partner with an organization to have a backup communication center. So if we were going into this without that backup, we would want to harden as much as we could our only communication center. Since we have an opportunity for a backup, we can spend a little bit of less money on this front, put this on the 2nd floor, still make it tornado resistant. But if we get hit by a tornado, we may not be able to still function out of the building. We would just flip the switch and our alternate backup site would begin to function.
Okay.
So with that partnership that's been growing, we think we can make that happen. And us as a police department, if we have that secondary communication center in place with our partnership, then we would be good. The thing we don't want to happen is to get hit by something, turn us off, and not have a backup.
Sure. Okay.
There's a couple of areas in here. First of all, I'm not sure why we would need a Sally Port. Is there something going on that I'm not aware of? I mean, as far as housing prisoners, things like that falls to the sheriff's department. And I know that I work for the sheriff's department. And I love the Sally Port because it was more of a secure setting when you're pulling in. But I'm looking at basically a Sally Port for the Mount Juliet Police Department would be to bring somebody in when you were going to interview them for whatever crime. That's probably not as big a security issue as actually the arrest process is. So I'm wondering why the Sally Port, and wondering what the actual cost associated to that Sally Port would be in square footage.
Sure. I can't speak too much on the cost, but with us, it's definitely multi-purpose. But its main purpose is that Sally Port. The most dangerous offenders we arrest here in our community come to our police headquarters first. And we would want to bring them in, park, shut the Sally Port garage, and then get them out of that vehicle and into the secure interview room, and then they leave out secure as well. What we don't want to happen is have a violent offender that we transport, which we do today, and we take them through the front doors of police headquarters. So they're exposed to individuals in our lobby who are there to report crime or pay tickets. Our alternate way to bring them in is walk them through the grass by the park and bring them in the back door. So we're just trying to find a safer, more convenient way. This feature is very common on police departments all around. And while we were preparing our police headquarters for the future, 15 to 20 years out, we wanted to be sure we had all the design elements in place to bring us in to the future with the proper tools to help us with that. And I'll let James speak a little bit on the cost, but with the multi-purpose aspect of it, when part of the problem we have today is with our vehicle installs, we're having to send out our vehicle installs and they're sitting in the lot at these other garages in Nashville waiting to be installed on. But if we had a place where a install tech could come to our headquarters and work on the vehicle, such as this air-conditioned garage in Sallyport, then that would be helpful for us and save us some cost and having to constantly transport the cars to Nashville back and forth. They would come to us.
So when you're talking about the installs, you're talking about lights,
Lights,
and
sirens.
sirens,
Mhm.
and so forth.
We would use it for that as well. And then 3, the Sallyport is used to process evidence. We have no covered parking that's out of the weather, that's air conditioned for our detectives to process evidentiary vehicles, to fingerprint them, to go in and out, take evidence out that may be, quickly bag it out of the weather, take that inside to headquarters and drop it in our evidence room. So it says Sallyport. It's for transporting prisoners that are most violent to interview them, to keep them secure. 2, it's used as a multi-purpose garage for different installs that we may have. We may need to bring a car in the garage to process it out of the weather with AC. And then 3, to process evidentiary vehicles.
So I guess this part would come to, what do we talk about, square footage needed for that, and what is the cost per square foot?
It was
Approximate,
Only, yeah,
obviously.
it was only a couple thousand square feet. It is probably one of the lowest cost per square foot in the building. I don't know if I could really speak to specifically what that is. I think that would be something I would defer to the general contractor. But I do know that this kind of facility gives them a lot of flexibility, like Captain was saying, for vehicle installs, the technology installs, the Canine gives a place for the Canine to come in and be out of the weather, in addition to the Sallyport. It also gives place to detectives to bring in any kind of informant and bring them in the building without them being visible. So it serves a lot of different functions, but it's basically a big raw garage.
The other thing I was looking at here was the Canine, and you're looking at the Canine. I don't know what you would do there. My understanding is Canine units are kept at the homes of the handlers, and so they're actually allotted money towards their maintenance and care of that animal
Correct.
in their paycheck. So
Sure.
I'm trying to figure why we need a Canine location at the police department.
Sure. And the Canine doesn't live at headquarters, but if something happened to our Canine officer, we would need an opportunity to place that dog somewhere where we could care for it. 2 is when the Canine officer is in court for long periods of time or out on a special assignment, they need a temporary location to store the dog within the city limits. And then 3, when the Canine officer is busy processing evidence, paperwork at headquarters, which could take hours, the dog, instead of being crammed in the patrol car running out in front of our headquarters, is in his kennel running around. But what that Canine kennel also brings is a wash area for the dog, where the Canine officers can wash the dogs. We have another Canine on the way that'll be here in 2 months, so we just don't have one, we'll have 2. Can wash the dogs. There's also storage in that Canine area for all of their equipment that they need, and also secure storage for the narcotics that are diverted to them for their training. It's all kept in there under nice lock and key and camera. Again, as our city grows 15 to 20 years out, we have to prepare for that. You know, right now we have 2 canines,
And
and we want to prepare that out for 15 to 20 years, so we don't have to come back to you and say, well, we need canine kennels because I have a canine officer that's ill and I have nowhere to put it, you know.
let me interrupt you right there. First of all, and you know, I love you to death.
Yeah.
And the police department, my blood is blue. You know that. Police officers, me being one of them, I love toys. We love all the cool stuff that goes along with it. You know, I remember getting the cameras in the patrol cars. It was awesome. We didn't have cameras for a long time. So when we get that stuff in, man, it is, I mean, we're like salivating. We look like that canine, you know, going after a suspect. The first thing that pops into my head is I didn't know this was a 15 or 20 year. I thought this was a 5 to 10 year actual growth plan. So if we're going on out 20 years, then, this may be bigger than what we anticipated anyway. So, I mean, I love the cool toys and everything, but, we also have a budget we've got to work within.
Sure.
So while we might want some things and may even have a need for some things, we're going to have to stay within that budget. So
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And definitely we looked into this. One of our 3 key words that we used going into this was frugal, durable, and functional. That's what we as a command staff gave our architects to design this within. It's not designed to Brentwood standards. It's not designed to Murfreesboro standards. It's designed to as frugal as we could get it. Our architects and ourselves and administration met with our staff on their needs. Part of the biggest need, the stuff you see today are the needs from our officers that would make their job easier and safer when they're out there. And if we're planning something out 15 years, then it's important that we get it right now. So we're not having to come back with you, because we'll have other needs in 10 to 15 years out that will require further investments. Y'all have been grateful in supporting our strategic growth plan that we provided you for 10 years. This police building is one of those in there, but there's also needs in that strategic growth plan beyond our police headquarters. And this police headquarters is so important to us today because our city's growing. Our police department is growing with the city, but we're going to have a spot for all of our resources.
Well, I
And
guess
if
my point being in this is that, and I agree with everything. Like I said, I love the cool toys too. But this was all presented as a 10-year
I have to
plan.
disagree with you there.
Well, no, it was presented to us as a 10-year plan, and that was
Our
what we were talking
strategic
about.
plan was 10 years, but the building effort was told to us was 15 to 20 years, and that's what
I'm not saying anything that has anything to do with 10 years down the road. I'm saying 20 years, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I know that what I was looking at originally and what I'm getting now it's 2 different animals.
Okay.
I mean, I'm the one that actually said, let's build this thing rather than go out here and provide support to what was an excellent church, and then all of a sudden, we got a police department there. When we got that police department, everybody was like, wow, man, this is an awesome police department.
It was great, and it's been great for the past 8 years.
Yeah. And for some reason now it's just trash. And so we've got to, do something completely different. It's going to cost the taxpayers, anywhere up between $10 and $20 million. So, it went from being the greatest thing since sliced bread to being the worst thing that we could ever be in.
Sure. And when we went in that building, we were 20 less police officers, and our population, I believe, was 14,000 less. We're growing at a rapid rate, and we see other agencies in our county that haven't kept up with the growth rate, and we see what situation
That have not
kept up with the growth rate, and we all see the impact. The impact is on public safety. We see that it's keeping ambulances unstaffed across the county. Luckily, we're grateful to have a proactive leadership team, and each of you sit up here today and y'all have supported us greatly. We've done the research. We work with the architects. We've gone through all the proper processes to get the data to you guys, and this is the data that you see on what our needs are. And I know you mentioned toys, and yes, we are grateful for what we have now. We're blessed to be in what we have now, but we're growing. And what we're requesting are not toys. They are our needs to keep this city safe, to keep our officers as safe as they can be, and give them the tools that they need to protect. We are a city that already does stuff with less. We have 68 police officers protecting a town of about 40 to 42,000 people, and we're frugal. And this building is going to be frugal, but it's not going to be cheap by any means. And that's why we wanted to present y'all multiple options. We presented Plan A. You brought a great idea with Plan B. We like Plan B better. I think that gives you some opportunities down the road elsewhere in this city to help some of our other citizens in the community.
Well, and I will tell you, I mean, I can't claim this is just my idea. I will tell you that because, I mean, Commissioner Hefner and I had tons of conversations about this. So I'm let him in on this as well. He and I both had the concerns of actually spending all this money, $18 million or whatever it was, on what used to be an awesome church,
Right.
Joy Church, and we bought it for a police department. And,
Right.
served its purpose. Now we need to move on. And so I get that. But I just don't want to, I
Absolutely.
want to make sure we don't go too far.
Yeah, I understand that, Mr. Hefner.
On the alternative site study, and thank you for putting that together. What's the total square footage on that, including both first and second floors?
It's the same.
Same square footage?
Yeah, we tried to work with the exact same program, the exact same square footage.
Okay.
As Plan A. Just how would it stack up on?
And if I'm hearing everything, if I'm hearing you correctly, this 32,000 square feet, is that where we're roughly at, is for 15 to 20 years?
Yes. Yes.
So first question that comes to mind is, what are we doing with that excess capacity between now and 15, 20 years? Because the way I think of it is, if I'm going to have
Yeah.
a family of 20 kids, I'm not, I only got 2 today. I'm not going to build a house to accommodate 20 kids. I know it's kind of a strange analogy, but what are we doing with the excess capacity?
Sure. And the excess capacity is not immediately noticeable. So as you think of growth of a police department, that's going to be in a building, right? So your police officers, they're mostly out in the field working, right? So when we think of growth internally, we're thinking our administrators' offices, right? Your command staff, any administrative staff, civilians that we hire to work in there. So your records offices, your dispatch center, those are all just a little bit bigger than what they are today, right? And think if our city, right now we have 68 police officers, right? That serve a population of 40,000 people. Let's project, what do we think? I don't have my strategic plan in front of me with our growth plan, but what do you suspect our population will look like in 15 to 20 years? Will it double? Likely not. So likely our city will eventually cap out in the growth and how large our police department will be. So what you see as extra space really isn't much extra, right? It gets us to where we need to be, but it's not like you have half a building that's empty.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what we typically find is a police department grows incrementally across all those different departments. So like there's one extra office in admin for a future admin. There's one extra desk in records for future records. There's a future dispatch station. The evidence is probably the biggest where you try to project enough storage space for evidence. So it's like you said, it's little slices everywhere. It's not there's not like 5,000 square feet sitting here empty someplace because police departments don't grow like that. Each little department grows, each part grows incrementally across time. Does that help?
So you're saying that the square footage for per person in the building is actually reduced as growth is absorbed within the building?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
And if I could speak,
Yeah.
and on our strategic growth plan, eventually the fire department and us are part of our strategic growth plan are going to come to you with a training center somewhere, right? So our training room in police headquarters may be absorbed as existing space as we grow, where we're not doing training in there anymore. It would be at this training center that would eventually come 5 to 10 years out from now.
Okay.
Right. So all that is in our strategic plan and growth, trying to be as frugal as we can now and to add growth later. Does that make, I see some looks there, but. And then part of the growth is the parking lot. The parking lot's fairly large because we have to accommodate the future amount of police vehicles that we would have.
Training, not dispatch. Some of these evidence, can some of these other, some of these use cases here, can they be built or constructed on existing city property that's not right in the middle? I know we've got some property where our gun range is located. We also have buildings scattered throughout the city. Have we exhausted all of our efforts to see where we can utilize some of our existing buildings for some of these well, they're essential, but
Sure. I believe
maybe
we have.
training doesn't have to be in police headquarters. Maybe it can be somewhere else with lower cost.
Sure. I believe we've exhausted that. I mean, right now we already have our detective division in an old home nearby, right, with our drug unit. And all these other components, they need to be together, right? Our dispatch works directly with our records teams. They work directly with evidence. You don't want your evidence really out elsewhere. Our admin team works directly with patrol and in ensuring, we have to lead the department. You don't want your leadership team to be separate from who you're trying to
Sure.
lead and help with the culture, right? So all those components are there, and I would think they would need to be under one roof. Chief could speak differently. We have seen some organization or police departments put evidence off-site, but it's not really convenient. It's more of their long-term evidence. Their officers still come to headquarters to originally drop their evidence, but then that stuff is transferred to this off-site location. I don't think that's a safe way of doing it, and I think it leads to some chain of custody issues. I think you want your evidence under the same building as your police headquarters because it's properly protected.
The existing building is noted as repurposed. What's the thought there under the alternative?
Well, I think we have a lot of options for what we can do with it in the future. And I think we just open that up. And if we choose to move ahead with this plan and explore what we can do with that, I mean, there's been a few things that have been discussed, but let's get together and if we move forward on this and really carve that out.
Okay.
I think it'll make a nice announcement.
That'd be great. Yeah, I was more just clarifying that there's going to be zero leftover PD operations,
Right.
including court, in the existing building.
Sure, and some
Because I didn't
bonus-
see court listed on the alternative building.
It is. It's on that little
Front
square at the
corner.
bottom. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I
The-
stand corrected. Thank you.
And the good thing with going with Plan B, as we looked at it as a police department, is there's some cost you're saving. Yeah, we're going to have to buy that land out front, but the costs that are associated with interrupted services, where the construction team would have to adjust to our operations, cost money, right? Because they're having to change their schedules. They just can't get in it and do it. With this design, they're able to get in it and do it and not be interrupted by our operations. The public isn't going to be interrupted. They can still come to court freely, report their crimes, work with our officers throughout all of that. And I believe it gives the city an opportunity to help other constituents in our community.
Last thing, I commend your efforts on this alternative site plan. I was never crazy about throwing any amount of money at a pole barn. I think starting from scratch and building what we need from day one is the right approach, and that's one that I'm going to support, obviously based on the cost.
Yeah, we are grateful for that. One thing that's super important to us is obviously the required code that it needs to be built to, so we can ensure that all the different needs are met with our communication center and also our protection as a police department. And with threats today and targets at police departments, we want to be sure that bullets can't come through the walls and hit us. And we want to be sure if we lose power in the city, whether it's a tornado or a other natural disaster or some type of man-made event, we don't want to lose power or communications, right? That dispatch center, that building really truly becomes an operations center for the city when our city is in its worst times. And we need it to work its best when the city is in those bad times, so we can keep serving and protecting as best as we can.
Commissioner Mullally, do you have any questions?
Of course. Are you saying that the proposed renovations was more of a 10-year plan and the alternative site is more of a 20-year plan? No?
No, ma'am, it's all the same. All the same square footage compared to our programming. And programming would be the term used for our needs assessment. And then all of that calculated into a square footage based off the architect's design. And then they move it around and program it and make it into a building that's functional for us.
So you think either one would sustain you for 20 years?
15 to 20 years. Again, I'm being vague with that because I don't know how our city is going to grow. But if we have 14,500 square foot now with 68 police officers, and we've just now maxed that out, I don't see our police department, and we're doubling that square foot and adding some other extra features with garage and storage space and parking. I don't see our city maxing out much more where we have 145 police officers.
All right, so the difference, if it's the same square footage, what does the alternative site have that the proposed site doesn't have? I see a service court I see that, but basically,
I would, when I look at it, what I would say that the alternative site has is, first of all, it reduces the construction impact on the police department. As we were interviewing contractors, one of the things that came up was the act of building that was going to radically impact the way they do work or radically impact the sequence of construction. That's one thing. The second thing is that when you're renovating a building, you're always fighting around renovating a building, and there's square footage you gain just because you're trying to make it fit. This kind of building, you're allowed to get it as tight and frugal as you can, and clean up any of the excess square footage you were losing when you're trying to force fit it into an existing building. It also really opened up the ability to give them a nice clean parking lot, 2 ways in and out, which improves their safety. And then the thing I was really excited about when I realized I could pull it off was this secondary kind of service court. That's a secure place for deliveries to occur, people to come and get their evidence, that's outside the secured parking of the officer, so the officer's safe. And it's also separate from the main public entrance.
okay.
I'd like to add a little bit
Yeah.
to that. I think what you also see too is we've seen the code and the requirements for our building, and we're currently not in an essential service building code now. But that being said, our building is still a great building, and it could be used for many other needs that aren't related to public safety, right? And can continue to serve this community. And I think a very good capacity. I think obviously the city hasn't made a decision about that, so they're not, speaking on those different options at the moment. But again, our building's a great building. We just grown out of it, and we're trying to provide you options on the best option, so we can get into something that's more adequate.
Okay. On the original bids that came in too high, was this front property considered in those bids?
It was not.
Okay, so at what point did that come into play on this second round of bids?
No, ma'am. It was just an idea that came about down the road I think once we saw the cost, and if we're going to spend 15 to 16 million in construction cost on a building, I think we all thought it would probably be best if we had a fresh new building, and let's repurpose the building we have for another city function.
All right, so the bids that have come in recently, you've narrowed them down to what, 5?
We narrowed it down to 1. We did go through a RFQ process request for qualification process, and the parent company was our contractor that we selected for the Plan A. We have not signed contract with parent company yet. The contract is still with legal, being reviewed, and that obviously has not came in front of you yet. The parent company is here today just because they wanted to show their support for this project. But again, that marriage hasn't been solidified.
Okay. Can I ask who it is, the company?
The parent company.
The parent company?
Yeah, the parent company.
All right. And who owns the property in front of the building?
I believe Gary Merritt owns that property.
All right. And how much is he wanting to sell it for?
I didn't get those details today, and our deputy chief hasn't got the details today. Gary, are you prepared to speak? No, and Gary's not prepared to speak, so I still think we have to go through negotiations if we want to buy that property.
Okay. Has any kind of study been done on that property at all?
Not yet, but you're talking about like a geotechnical study and stuff like that. That would be something that would have to be done probably before we purchased it or anything, and that would have to be done for the design and engineering. Is you'd want to do a geotechnical study, the same study they've done on our lot.
All right, so we're about out of time, so I assume we're going to have another work session to talk about the bids and all that.
Well, we need strong direction. So one thing we need as a police department, I believe as a city, is we need strong direction on how we're moving, because the direction has been coming at us at different angles. We need that strong direction so we can get moving, because if we break ground today and start constructing, it'll be a year and 8 months before that building's complete. Our city's still growing, our police department's still growing. We're still adding pods in the back of PD to store evidence. So we really need strong direction, and if it's Plan B that you want to move forward with, we need to get that design process going forward. We need to work on contracting with the property owner and see if we can negotiate a deal.
Well, you know, it's almost 6 o'clock, but I can say from what I've heard, my direction would be to continue to explore and work towards the offsite facility for all the advantages it gains us.
You're talking about Plan B?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else wants to vocalize.
Yes, like I said, myself and Commissioner Hefner jumped on this pretty early and suggested, I like the way he put that, rather than rehabbing a pole barn
Sure.
with the 15 million, 14, whatever it may be, let's see what we can't do and get a brand new building for the police department. I'm kind of curious, and this can kind of go to Gino on this, because the way we're shopping this and the way we're going to be negotiating the property on this, is there a process that we go through? Because, I mean, the man who owns the property is willing to put that into the deal and do basically a build to suit, if you would, for us, and include that. So he's the only one that has the availability to do that because he owns the property. So how do we differentiate between bids when we're going out and asking contractors to bid on this and be a like bid for him and him owning the property?
And we did already go through that RFQ process with contractors for Plan A. So I don't know if that makes a difference, Gino.
Did Merritt submit a proposal?
We haven't, well, on this Plan B that we've got now, we haven't put the RFPs out right now. So yet, so I mean, that's not giving him an opportunity to submit to this.
He'll be part of the process as anybody would.
Okay, so
We did a construction manager, which is working with our architect, and then at that point down, they will do the bid for the construction of the project. So I don't know that we can, the state law allow us to buy a property and have that one construction. I think we have to bid that construction out. So I think we work with the parent company on the construction part of it, and then when he goes and bids it out, then anybody has an opportunity to bid on the construction of it.
Could he- the parent company is the name of the
Construction manager. And they also could be the contractor to build it.
Yeah, they would be bidding the construction of it out, so they would be, I guess,
So,
the main.
can I clarify one little thing here? It's a use of words that's really critical here. The city issued a request for qualifications for a construction manager as contractor to build a police facility. We gave them the schematic drawings we had done. It was open, anybody could submit. We had 5 people submit. They interviewed 4. They all provided their best guess estimate based on those drawings and their experience of building these type of facilities, the range at which a building of that type could cost. It was not a bid.
It was a proposal, correct?
The proposal actually only required general conditions. The rest of it was an estimate, because what a construction manager does, works on your behalf and then bids out all the sub trades, and all that's open book and reviewable by the city officials. So it's not a hard bid situation. It's actually working as a team to get you the best value for all the parts and pieces. So what you have right now is a series of estimates of construction cost, not a bid. What you do have is a general contractor that has built police facilities that you selected through a regular process. I just want to clarify, that we all get lost in that bid proposal, and it's critical to keep that straight in our heads.
Well, we're a few minutes over now. We've got to move on to our financial audit. So, any direction, thoughts from anybody? Is there an appetite for having another session of this?
I would like so, because I'm confused on, if the bid with the parent company didn't include this alternate proposal, then it's not really, and if you're looking as an alternative, then.
Right. I think, what we did was we sought a construction manager from whatever we could possibly build. Again, the city has not finalized that contract, but we did go through the process. Legal has the contract now. But I think when we continue to keep pushing this off, we need direction. So I think it may be beneficial to the city to work with our city manager and Gary Merritt to try to come up with a deal for that property and get that in front of you and continue direction on the design to finalize the design on that property so we can keep this project moving forward. Because if we continue to keep delaying, we just keep delaying.
How much time would you need to get that, between using city manager and Mr. Merritt to work together to get something for us? I mean, how much time are we talking about? Because if it's 2 weeks or a month or what, I'd just like to get that scheduled tonight.
Yes, sir.
If we can. And then that way we got a hard date on there. Just want to put Mr. Merritt on the spot.
I've got a suggestion if I might. What I'd like to do, if we could just ask the city manager to go ahead and bring us a contract, a negotiated contract back at the next commission meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that will begin our due diligence process. That's the only thing that will start that due diligence process. There's not going to be any money down, so don't even ask. But come up with a price between the two of you, get a contract put together. Mr. Marchetti can handle that part of it and have us the contract ready by the next meeting. And then we can move forward with due diligence and the proposals, whatever we need for the construction process.
Yeah.
Is that okay with the commission?
Yeah, I agree. I
Is
agree
that
with
a
that.
yay or nay? Or
Yes.
I'm looking at Mr. Merritt. All right, I got a thumbs up. So
We'll have that back to you by the next Board of Commissioners meeting.
okay.
And thank you. Before we leave, we appreciate each of y'all and all the work that y'all put into it, the different ideas that you continue to provide us. We also appreciate Mr. Merritt for his continued work with our police department and city. It's obviously he cares deeply about our department and wants to help us in whatever way he can. Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir.